I work for something called the Association for Democratic Reforms, the stated objective of which is to improve governance and democracy in the country. We started with this limited or vast objective, not knowing what we were getting into. We thought when we looked at governance, the most important form of governance is political governance. And for political governance, India had chosen democracy as a means of governance. Therefore, we thought we'd stick to democracy. And elections are the mechanism through which democracy comes into being, so we thought we'd stick to elections. Once we got there, we thought the electoral process needs to be reformed. In that, we found to our surprise, horror, that the electoral process was moving towards being heavily criminalized. So we thought we would work for decriminalization of the electoral process. And then, once we were doing that for about 7 or 8 years, we learned that what is important is transparency in the political system. And that is the stage we are at now. I will lead you through that in a minute. We started in 1999, I said, with what is called a public interest litigation in the Delhi High Court. We succeeded. The Union of India decided to file what is called a special leave petition against the High Court judgment in the Supreme Court of India. The Supreme Court of India turned down that special leave petition, upheld the High Court judgment. Then the entire political spectrum got together. 22 political parties met in what is called an all-party meeting and decided that the judgment of the High Court and the Supreme Court will not be allowed to be implemented. They amended the law, and we went to the Supreme Court against the amended law. And in 2003, the Supreme Court said that the amendment of the law was null and void, unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court judgment had retained finality. No appeal shall be allowed against it. So this is again a feather in the cap of our judicial system. We've heard from two distinguished members of that system this morning, and I think what they said holds a lot of weight. So following those public interest litigation, we've been doing what we call election watch in every single parliamentary and state election in the country since 2002. Therefore, this is an ongoing activity. We started working on political party being declared as, first of all, we worked on, oops, I think I moved forward. We worked after the right to information law came into being in 2005. We tried to get income tax returns of political parties. We had to fight for something like 2.5 years to get those. We got those. Having got those, we discovered that they did not give us enough information. We then tried to get political parties declared as public authorities under the right to information law. We started that process in 2010. In 2013, the statutory authority, Central Information Commission, said 6 national political parties are public authorities under the law. But I have put those 3 question marks because it is an ongoing process. There is an attempt to amend the law to take political parties out of its ambit. That is being fought as we speak. So actually that should say 2014, not 13. Then since 2002, we have a database of over 75,000 persons who have contested elections to parliament or state assemblies. This is available in the public domain for anybody to use wherever in the world. And this is based on sworn affidavits submitted by candidates contesting elections themselves. So authenticity of this data is not in doubt. Our work has found some recognition and acceptance. Just 4 examples of that. I am happy to say that the first 2 examples are dependent on information technology. NASSCOM gave us an award for multi-stakeholder partnership with another software company, developing our website called myneta.info, where all these information is stored in December 2011. The Digital Empowerment Foundation gave us an award for mobile innovations for good governance, where we send out text messages or short SMSs to people, and people can send an SMS and get information about the candidate or their elected representative. This was in August 2012. Last year was a bit of a bumper year. The Times of India decided to give us a Social Impact Award in January, and in December, we were named Indian of the Year for Public Service. So we feel pretty good about it, but we also, Madhukar was talking to me during the tea break, and he said 2013 has been a bumper year. I said, but except for the implementation of criminalization judgment, nothing else has happened on the ground. A lot of things happen, but whether they actually change the situation on the ground is what we need to worry about. This session is titled Political Financing and Lobbying. So I will begin with election financing. Election financing and political financing are an area where exact data or concrete proof is impossible to get. There are laws and there is an implementation of those laws, but I am not sure whether we have concrete and correct data or not, and I'll show you that by examples. So one has to make inferences. So towards making those inferences, let me share with you a 10-year analysis of candidates since 2004. We analyzed, these are sworn affidavits declaring assets of a candidate. So out of, for 62,847 candidates, the average assets were 1.37 crores. I have deliberately kept the Indian currency measures in the Indian parlance, and I have put dollars separately so that our international participants can compare those. The assets of MPs and MLAs, elected representatives, are something like 2.5 times more than the candidates. This is a very controversial figure. It sounds outrageous that the average assets per citizen of India are 10 lakhs. But this comes out of some economic data given by the Government of India records, and some economists whose opinions I trust have told me this is the data, and they have shown me a calculation. But if it is lower than this, then the comparison is even more stark. Then out of those 62,847 candidates, we found there were 4,181 candidates who were contesting again. So we could compare their assets before, after one election to the next election. And the increase in wealth was 2.34 crores. Growth in assets was from 1.74 to 4.08. You can see the proportion that it works out. There were 1,615 candidates whose assets grew for over 200%. If 200% is not enough, there were 500%. And if 500% is not enough, there is 800%. And that number incidentally turns out to be 420, which is a bit coincidental. For participants from outside India, in the Indian Penal Code, Section 420 is fraud, is committing fraud on somebody else, cheating and fraud. And then there are also people who have assets who have grown 1,000%. Whether the assets of an average Indian has grown in these proportions is a separate issue. Now we compare the assets of members of the Legislative Assembly from one election to another. Here again, we see marked increase. Election expenditure by candidates. This is a very interesting table because every candidate says that he or she spent less than the prescribed limit. And then we have more interesting data. In the parliament elections, Lok Sabha is the lower house of parliament, we analyzed the expenditure affidavits of 6,753 candidates. Out of these, only 4 said they spent more than the limit. Of course, these 4 lost. 30 said that they spent about 90 to 95% of the limit. The balance, 6,719, 99.4965% said they spent about half of the limit. Now, this is to be seen in contrast to a huge hue and cry by politicians of all shapes and sizes and forms, saying the limit is very low, we have to spend much more. One member of parliament said in a public meeting in Bombay, which was attended by hundreds of people and which was videographed by 125 cameramen, that he spent 8 crores in this last parliament election. 1 week later, a member of Rajya Sabha from Haryana said that if you can spend 100 crores, you can become a member of the Rajya Sabha, which is the upper house of parliament. And the limit is 25 lakhs or 40 lakhs. Of course, the next day there was a cartoon in the paper saying, if you have 100 crores, you can get into Rajya Sabha. And if you get into Lok Sabha, you can make 100 crores. So the expenditure show, and this has to do about what Justice Santosh Hegde was saying, illegality is to be accepted now. It has become the norm. People who have shown in a sworn affidavit that they have spent 50% have stood next to me in television debates and said, we have to do this, how can we show more than the limit? But we all spend more and nothing happens. Illegality is accepted. Now, let us make a difference between election financing and political financing. The whole lot of debate in India that goes on is, people say a candidate gives a statement of elections, he or she gives his income tax return, etc., etc. But it is the political financing which is working 24/7, 12 months a year. Election funding works only about 6-8 months before the election and maybe a month or two after the election. This is where the biggest problem is. Getting information of financing of political parties is a Herculean task. As I said, we asked for income tax returns. Political parties brought in 10 lawyers to the Central Information Commission in that hearing. One political party from Chennai flew 2 senior advocates of the Madras High Court for that hearing. And there was a 3-hour hearing in which the political parties gave some very interesting reasons that this will affect our competitive commercial interests. But after a 2-year struggle, we were able to get income tax returns. When we got income tax returns, we discovered that the income tax returns of political parties are 100% exempt from income tax under Section 13A of the Income Tax Act. So legitimately, they were claiming total exemption from income tax. But that law since 2003 has a proviso which says, provided the political party submits a statement of donations received of more than rupees 20,000 each to the Election Commission of India. So we went to the Election Commission of India and said, please tell us how many parties have submitted this statement. We discovered that except for 4 parties, no party had ever submitted that statement. Then we filed RTI applications to political parties seeking sources of income. We said, please, because the statement of donations explained only 20 to 25% of the income declared in the income tax return. 75 to 80% of the income sources were not known. So we applied to political parties seeking sources of income. They said, we are not public authorities under the Right to Information Act, therefore we will not respond to you. Then we went to the Central Information Commission saying that because political parties use public facilities by way of public housing, public offices, public land given to them by government at heavily subsidized rates, they are exempt from tax. Thousands of crores of rupees of tax, and we quantified all that, is being waived off in loss to public exchequer. They are exercising a constitutional right under the anti-defection law, where if an elected member of parliament does not vote according to the whip of the party, he or she can be removed from parliament. This is a part of the constitution now under Schedule 10. And a political party legally cannot come into existence unless it is registered by the Election Commission of India under Section 29A of the Representation of People Act. With all this information, the Central Information Commission said that there will be public authorities under the RTI Act. But that, as I said, is being disputed. This is the state of income of political parties. Total income of 6 national political parties from 2004-5 to 2011-12 was almost 5,000 crores, out of which 106 crores was from electoral trusts, 436 from known donors, about 790 from other donors, but something like 75.05% is from unknown sources. This is still a black box. The struggle goes on. I can skip this. Why the secrecy? First of all, does this question need to be asked? I thought to myself after I typed this, then I put it in red. India's Right to Information Act has been rated as the second best out of 89 countries rated by a website called rtiratings.org. Now, this act does not yet, well, it applies to 6 parties as of now, but it is under dispute. The Law Commission of India, way back in 1999, made the following observation, in which I suggest you read only the blue and the red part. The bulk of the funds contributed to political parties would come only from a business house, only from business houses, corporate groups and companies. This is the Law Commission saying very often these payments are made in black money. This is not a hair-brained activist saying. It is the Law Commission of India, headed by Justice B.P. Jeevan Reddy of the Supreme Court of India. What can be done? Well, obviously, financial transparency, but what does that mean? I am not too sure. Maintenance of accounts by political parties in a standardized format. When we saw the income tax returns, we discovered that the income tax returns were also being submitted in different formats. And even retired commissioners of income tax were not able to make full sense of it. So we approached the Election Commission of India suggesting that there should be a standard format for political parties to maintain their accounts. The Election Commission went to the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and suggested that they devise a format for political parties to maintain their accounts. The Institute of Chartered Accountants of India did that. That was presented to political parties in one of our national conferences in Chennai about 3 years ago, when there were representatives of 7 political parties on the stage, and every one of them denounced it completely. Subsequently, the Election Commission called an all-party meeting where it was discussed, but it was not accepted by the political parties. So that's another thing that needs to be done, ICAI recommendations. Audit of political parties, either by auditors empaneled by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India or by the Election Commission of India, not from auditors of their choice. Now, perhaps the final, it sounds very, very dangerous when you say the final solution, but to me the final solution is internal democracy in the functioning of political parties by law. Now, the catch-22 obviously is how will this law be passed? When we have difficulty in getting through Parliament to say that political parties which the statutory authority under the Right to Information law has determined should be public authorities, even that is not being accepted. We are still struggling with that committee. On Sunday morning, there was a discussion telecast on the Doordarshan News where the chairman of that committee was one of the participants, and as it happened, so was I. The struggle is still on. The report of the standing committee is still in the public domain. It has not yet been accepted. We are working to make sure that it is not accepted and that the RTI law is not amended. But if it is amended, we will again go to the Supreme Court to get that amendment nullified. and we hope that judiciary will again stand up for democracy in the country. Internal democracy by law is critical because this is what the Law Commission said. This has been recommended by several commissions, including by Justice Venkatachalaya, who is not here now. Actually, under his guidance, we have drafted a bill for introducing functioning of internal democracy in political parties. A committee headed by Justice Janaagraha drafted that, but that bill obviously has not found support amongst any of the political parties. And this is what the Law Commission has said: if democracy and accountability constitute the core of our constitutional system, the same concepts must apply to and bind the political parties. It is therefore necessary to introduce internal democracy, financial transparency and accountability in the working of political parties. A political party which does not respect democratic principles in its internal working cannot be expected to respect those principles in the governance of the country. It cannot be dictatorship internally and democratic in its functioning outside. We have all this stuff to show for and share it with you. The question is, how do we get there? There seems to be only two ways as far as we've been able to figure out in the last 15 years. One is mobilizing public opinion, and the other is the judiciary so far, and the media. The media, despite all its failings, has been reporting what we put out fairly prominently. And our understanding is that if media finds something newsworthy, however newsworthy is defined, they will report it. The judiciary has come to our rescue and to the rescue of democracy from time to time. Since June last year, there have been 5 judgments of the Supreme Court which have actually shaken the political establishment in the country. And we are hoping that they will reach somewhere, if not right to the end. And the last is perseverance. In 15 years, we have been able to do just a little bit, but a lot more needs to be done. And as the 2 awards show, without having started out as a technology-driven organization, our dissemination process has become technology-driven. And I think we are doing reasonably well on that, but a lot more needs to be done. Just to quote this cliche, that democracy is a journey, it is not a destination. And to quote another judge from the US Supreme Court, Felix Frankfurter, he once wrote, the most important job in a country is that of being a citizen. We believe that an active citizenry is the only way democracy can be saved and maintained.